Ukrainian jets strike Russian base, then this happened. Good evening. Tonight we bring you an extraordinary story from the front lines of Ukraine, a mission that reads more like a scene from a war thriller than real life. But make no mistake, this was very real. A Ukrainian pilot flying a MiG-29 fighter carried out one of the riskiest strikes yet against a heavily fortified Russian border post. What followed was a harrowing minute-by-minute test of skill, endurance, and sheer luck. Here's how it unfolded.
The mission begins. At exactly 2:47 in the afternoon, a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter crossed into Russian airspace. On board, 2 French-made precision bombs and a single mission: destroy a border guard post Moscow believed was untouchable. That post was vital. It supplied Russian forces deeper inside Ukraine with the ammunition hammering Ukrainian troops. If this pilot succeeded, it would disrupt the supply chain. If he failed, it would mean certain death. But within just 90 seconds of crossing the border, everything began to unravel. Flying at treetop level to avoid radar, his GPS went dark, jammed by Russian electronic warfare. His fuel gauge was falling toward empty. And then, a bird strike. A crow slammed into his left engine at 180 kilometers per hour. The blades shredded instantly. The jet lurched downward. For a moment, the mission and the pilot's life hung in the balance.
Brush with disaster. With training kicking in, the pilot fought to stabilize the aircraft. One hand pulled back on the stick, the other frantically worked to restart the engine. The MiG dropped dangerously close to the trees. Seconds later, the damaged engine sputtered back to life, but running rough and burning more fuel than he could afford. Even worse, a nearby Russian radar briefly picked up his signature. The operator had 6 seconds of lock before losing contact in the hills. Should he report it or dismiss it as a flock of cranes? He chose coffee. That hesitation may have saved the Ukrainian pilot. But time was running out. The pilot had lost precious fuel. His 12-minute reserve had shrunk to just 3. And then, another obstacle. Power lines appeared suddenly in his windscreen, strung across a valley. At 650 kilometers per hour, he had 2 seconds to react. Pulling nearly 5 Gs, he cleared them by barely 10 meters.
The attack run. Shaken but alive, the pilot pressed on. His navigation map confirmed he was closing in on the attack point. But what came next would test him like never before. To deliver his bombs, he had to climb, exposing himself to every radar and missile system within 200 kilometers. He shoved the throttles forward and pulled back on the stick. 6 times, Earth's gravity pinned him into his seat. His vision blurred to a tunnel, then went dark. At 6,500 meters, barely conscious, his fighter screamed skyward. Radar warning alarms lit up. Russian defenses had him. And then, another blow. The French bombs, jury-rigged to fit the Soviet-era jet, lost their digital connection under the stress of the climb. The weapons computer crashed. Without manual release, the mission was over. Enemy engagement. Meanwhile, a Russian Su-35 fighter locked onto him from 72 kilometers away. It fired a hypersonic R-37M missile. Closing speed, Mach 6. The Ukrainian pilot had 36 seconds before impact. With alarms blaring, he stayed on course. One hand steadying the climb, the other slamming emergency switches. Finally, the bombs dropped, seconds apart, igniting their rocket boosters as they streaked toward target. Now he could try to live. He rolled inverted and dove. A split S maneuver. 9 Gs crushed his body. His vision went black again. At 4,000 meters, he came to, missile still inbound. He launched chaff, but his jamming pod overheated and failed. The missile closed to 10 kilometers. One last chance, a notch maneuver. He turned perpendicular, tricking the missile's radar seeker into losing lock. The missile roared past, exploding harmlessly behind him. His MiG, riddled with shrapnel, dove for cover.
The bomb's deadly journey. While the pilot fought for survival, the bombs carried on. But their problems had only just begun. Russian electronic warfare jammed their GPS. The weapons switched to inertial guidance, less accurate, prone to error. Then, the sun itself blinded their infrared seekers, saturating their sensors with heat and glare. One bomb spun wildly in jet stream winds. Another flew blind, searching for contrast patterns instead of heat. Russian S-400 air defense missiles were fired, but their systems couldn't track the bomb's unpredictable, near-vertical descent. The missiles streaked past harmlessly. Finally, at just 2 kilometers above ground, both bombs locked on targets. One found Russian armored vehicles, the other locked onto the geometry of a roofline. But the defenders still had one last card, the Panzer S-1, Russia's most advanced point defense system. Missiles and rapid-fire guns filled the sky. Yet physics was merciless. The bombs were too steep, too fast, and just outside the system's engagement window. At 1451, the first bomb punched through a building roof at over 300 meters per second. Its shaped charge sliced sideways, collapsing the structure like a felled tree. 17 seconds later, the second bomb slammed into Russian vehicles. Fuel tanks ruptured. Diesel aerosolized into the air. Then, ignition. The resulting fireball reached 4,000 degrees Celsius. In an instant, 3 armored vehicles were obliterated. And the pilot? Barely alive. Running on one engine, nearly out of fuel, his body battered by extreme G-forces, he turned west. Against all odds, he crossed back into Ukrainian lines. Behind him, the border post burned. This was no Hollywood script, no clean victories, no easy triumphs. It was messy, ugly, and almost catastrophic. But in the brutal logic of war, the mission was a success. The supply chain was broken, and a single Ukrainian pilot lived to fight another day.